video that's going to cover Lake Niels in Cameroon. Now, the thing that, just full disclosure, in Cameroon it was not a pipeline leak per se, but it was a natural CO2 exposure. But the consequences and the danger is still the same when CO2 gets out to the environment. So I'm going to start with that.
In 2020, a pipeline carrying carbon dioxide ruptured in Mississippi. The plume of toxic waste forced hundreds to evacuate and sent 50 people to the hospital with dizziness, seizures, some even foaming at the mouth. First responders said it was like a zombie movie.
And 911. Running on the ground, and she's shaking, she's kind of drooling out of the mouth. I don't know if she's having a seizure or not. Tell me exactly what had happened. Like, I'm driving, and I ran into, like, a lot of fuel, like, there's a lot of noise going on. Because I know if anything's going to explode, I don't know what's going on.
Me and my brothers and my first cousin decided to, take a day and go fishing. Went up there and we fished. It had nighttime. We were on our way back, and around about 7 o'clock, I saw a big explosion. I was there when it happened. It actually just, big cloud of smoke went up in the air. And I called my mother immediately. And I told her, I said, Mama, this pipeline that blew up down here, we on our way to come get y'all. By the time we turned on Prairie Creek Road, off number 3, the car just shut off and went dead. But we woke up at the hospital.
So you passed out at that point?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we have also with us, we have Thelma Brown, and Thelma is Amber's mother.
Yes.
Okay, and Thelma, tell us about that phone call and what you were doing when it came and what happened.
I sure will. When they didn't come, I just got in the room and I apologized and let them give me a towel. And we'll close up in one room. And people were calling me, telling me I had to get out, got to get out. Some was saying stay, some was saying go. It was just like chaos all around me.
But you couldn't go. Right?
I couldn't go.
Why?
I had a flat on my car.
Okay.
I had a
You
flat.
were trapped.
I was trapped.
Okay. And these were grandchildren.
They were grandbabies.
And the youngest was how
He
old?
was about 4 months at that time.
Okay, and the others were a little bit older.
Yes.
And one of them had asthma?
Yes.
And that started getting a lot worse.
Both of them have asthma, and the little girl, she even has more now, since this explosion.
Bed, basically with the kids. And
Yes.
Gave it up.
I gave it up.
Yeah.
Whatever took me,
You couldn't get out.
no.
Over the weekend, dozens become sick and even more had to leave their homes after a gas leak and explosion in Yazoo County. Around 300 residents evacuate their carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide that leaked into the air after the incident near Sartarsha.
I think the leak happened, or the rupture happened somewhere around 7 o'clock that night. The company didn't call me in until somewhere around closer to 8 to say, hey, we've got a CO2 leak. So we didn't know what we had early on. And we had no idea what CO2 was. You won't smell, you won't see anything. So fortunately, once we got closer, we could hear the leak. It sounded like a jet engine crashed in your backyard. around, we started busting windows, looking inside there, I didn't think they were alive, just from outside the window. You could barely see any respiration. They were all slumped over the seat, all of them had bone coming out of their mouth. And, you know, you get to watch them a little closer, they may have been breathing 6 times a minute, 8 times a minute, which is just not good. Once we got them out, got them in ambulances, which was another ordeal in the rural community, getting multiple ambulances there. You know, most communities like that only have one. And once you fill it up, you know, that's it. So we had support coming from surrounding cities and counties. At that point, the command post said that the weather service had done a plume model to see where this gas went. And based on that plume model, it went through the village, across the river, and into some agricultural fields where it had some sporadic housing. I think we got an additional 8 out of those houses and brought them back to be taken to the hospital. I think 40 or 50 people were taken to the hospital. After the event, we went closer to the site, and everything was ice. The road was ice, the trees were ice, the wildlife was ice, everything was ice. That's the only way I knew it was some type of CO2, because everything was frozen.
It has been 5 days since a major gas leak in Yazoo County sent a whole town fleeing their homes.
Well, throughout the week, homes have been treated and virtually everyone is back in their homes, but the burn has not gone away.
12 News Alec Club joins us in studio and explains how these folks are feeling.
One of the closest to Highway 3, the Douglas family home was hit hard by the carbon dioxide leak, but feels they were one of the last to get out.
My wife had brought the dogs out to use the bathroom before we go to bed. The dogs come back in, but she didn't come back in. She was laid up against the porch. She couldn't breathe. I got her in the house. I called the sheriff's department, and they told me we had a gas leak.
Though they did require treatment in the hospital, since moving back in Sunday, Larry and his wife have found themselves coughing frequently and ill.
Getting sick in the stomach, can't eat, don't have no appetite, having headaches. We were sitting at the table eating supper the other night. I looked over at her, she had blood running down her nose.
While the company, Denbury, has shut off the pipe and begun the repair process, the Douglases and others have trouble settling back in, fearing an accident like this could happen again.
One of Africa's most bizarre natural disasters occurred on the 21st of August 1986 in a remote mountainous region of northwest Cameroon. It's estimated that between 1,700 to 2,000 people lost their lives. When outsiders entered the area after the disaster, they found whole villages full of corpses and pastures full of dead cattle. People had seemingly died where they stood or slept. The bodies of men, women and children lay sprawled in the roads or dead in their beds. The bodies showed no signs of physical trauma, and to compound the mystery, this tragedy occurred in a remote rural area. There seems to have been no explosion, no volcanic eruption, and with no industry using toxic materials anywhere nearby, it seemed a mystery as to what could have caused such deadly devastation. The answer lay in one of the strangest natural disasters to have happened in modern times. At 9:30 p.m. on August the 21st, 1986, a loud rumbling noise was heard coming from the lake. A huge bubble of water and carbon dioxide gas rose up from the bottom of the lake, sending a column of spray 100 meters into the air and sending a 25-meter high wave across the surface of the lake. At the same time, an estimated 1.2 million cubic meters of gas was released into the atmosphere. This gas cloud, being composed of carbon dioxide, which is heavier than air, began to sink down, forming a layer 50 meters thick, which then flowed over the crater lip, down into the valley towards the surrounding villages. The effects were instantaneous and devastating. As the cloud flowed out from the lake at an estimated speed of 40 kilometers per hour, it suffocated every living thing in its path. People, cattle, wildlife, even insects were smothered.
Nothing could escape the deadly cloud. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. There was nothing anyone in the path of the cloud could do. The gas cloud passed through the villages of Nios, Cham, Cam, and Cebu, killing an estimated 1,700 to 2,000 men, women, and children. Around 3,500 cattle, which is the main source of income for the villagers, were also killed. Incredibly, in the midst of all this death, there were one or two survivors. One of them described the moment that the disaster unfolded. I could not speak. I became unconscious. I could not open my mouth because then I smelled something terrible. I heard my daughter snoring in a terrible way, very abnormal. When crossing to my daughter's bed, I collapsed and fell. I was there till 9 o'clock the next morning. A friend of mine came and knocked at my door. I was surprised to see that my trousers were red and had some stains like honey. I saw some starchy mess on my body. My arms had some wounds. I didn't really know how I got these wounds. I opened the door. I wanted to speak. My breath would not come out. My daughter was already dead. I went into my daughter's bed thinking that she was still sleeping. I slept until it was 4:30 in the afternoon. Then I managed to go over to my neighbours' houses. They were all dead. I decided to leave. I got on my motorcycle. As I rode through Nios, I didn't see any sign of any living thing. At a distance of 25 kilometres from the lake, the cloud began to dissipate, and some people were able to flee, although many suffering with symptoms of gas poisoning. Around 800 survivors were treated at the main hospital in Yaoundé. It was believed that many of the victims had been poisoned by a mixture of gases that included hydrogen and sulphur, although later doctors concluded that death had occurred from carbon dioxide asphyxiation.
Okay, just one thing to wrap up on the video. In Mississippi, the Denbury pipeline that ruptured runs from Mississippi into Louisiana through southern Allen Parish, basically in our backyard, and then into Texas. Okay? So it's close.
Willie, you did a good job. And I don't know, just thinking. Is it on? Is it on? Just thinking about everything that's gonna happen, that will happen. I started out in the oil field, had to find something to do. We plugged these wells. And I've seen these welders get down in the hose, cut the casing off. They're gonna weld a cap on it, the weld belches. We pull the welder out of the hose, and company man says, backfill it. You got any weld on it? He says, yeah, maybe an inch. So all that being said, back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. It was in the 80s when I saw this happen. Who plugged those wells? Who capped them? Who welded the cap on? Who pumped the concrete in the ground? In that casing? Nobody. They were wildcatting, drill here, drill there, drill here. We hit. There's oil in the creek. Let's drill there. Nothing. Dry. Oh, we get two over here. Y'all know how to win. There's no record of what was capped and what was not capped. And everybody's going, this isn't a good deal. We might not see it, but our grandkids will. We're going to see it. You mark it down, we're going to see it. Because when it's like a bunch of straws in the ground right now, hundreds of thousands of these open-ended casings from these old wells. They're not recorded. Who drilled them? Carter Marcellus, I don't know. You know? He wasn't gonna cap it. He did. His name's on a lot of stuff around New Orleans and everywhere. His grandson told us to think that me and my geologist, Larry Dickerson, I met him out at a hearing, and he told us some things. But I'm gonna cut it short. I'm not a geologist. I don't intend to be. I've worked out there. I've talked to some guys that work pipelines, and man, we heard about this. We're gonna come, you know. Everybody's seen this kind of work and worked around this kind of stuff and was exposed to this deal. It's not good. Everybody over here's got 3 or 4 water wells on their rice farms. You've got crawfish. I see some crawfish people here. When it contaminates, when, not if, it will get in the 250 or 60 billion tons, they said, or however many tons they're gonna put in the ground. You don't think it's gonna blow out? It will find these little old wells that's not plugged sooner or later. And the Wilcox, Amoco tried to frack the Wilcox back in the 80s. 100% salt water. They make 400 barrels, they frack it, 100% salt water. Plug it, squeeze it, 200 barrels, let's leave it like that. You cannot frack this down here. It's not the same as fracking in that Haynesville shale. We know where it's gonna go. They don't know where it's gonna go. Amoco could do it. We have 4D. We have 4D, we have better technology. 4D. Why are they still drilling dry holes? Figure that out. And the only way they're gonna know that this CO2 is gonna stay right in this little area right here, that this high-tech 4D is gonna tell us where it's gonna stay, is if they put some kind of radioactive something in there and inject it in the ground, and let's see where it goes now. Well, when it hits these saltwater zones and sands, and that doesn't just frack like it fracks up there, it cracks the rock, and then you're getting oil and gas recovery, okay? You're not gonna be recovering anything with this CO2. You're gonna have a bubble just like what happened in Africa. And it's gonna start going through these saltwater sand zones or whatever. And I'm not a geologist. You know, it might stay right here where they said it's going to stay. I don't think it will, not while these open holes, and not the way they were fracking back then. And the technology, the 4D technology, will not show you where this is gonna stay. It's not gonna stay in A, B, and C. It's gonna go to elemental people. And that's all I can say. I mean, I just wish I had some geologist friends that said that they'd like to come, but they're in Texas, and they're gonna, if we need them later on, we've got it. Okay, listen, we got some. I'm done. was setting up right there. We were working in Pine Prairie for Co2. And, we were loading the truck. Some 2 7/8 pipe. And, Jackie Charette was the head guy right there for Co2. And he told us to come get our air packs and put them on. There was a man in the tank, they were cleaning the tanks bottoms, a lot of paraffin, sand, what it not in there, and they were cleaning. And they hollered at us to get our packs on, there was a man down in that tank. And, we had to tie a rope, couldn't drag him out of there with some of the stuff in there. And we drug him out, and, he didn't make it. And Jackie Charette from Henderson was the head guy right there. I wanted to say that, you know, it was a pretty bad deal.
Well, I'm gonna have to get on my tiptoes after going behind Charles to get to this microphone, but thank y'all for showing up tonight. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. And I'd like to thank our elected officials for being here tonight and, you know, helping us out and trying to see where we go to from here. But I think the common theme about this, is, you know, what are the risks? And, you know, well, I don't think we really know the risks. We don't really know the facts about this. So I'm going to try to give you as much as I know. I'm a 4th generation Louisianian. I'm a landowner, have grandchildren, and I think that's one of the main reasons that I'm here tonight for us and our grandchildren, is we gotta try to figure this out together. And what are the risks? You know, what is CCS? What is carbon dioxide? What might it do to us? Well, that didn't go well. Okay, that's kind of self-explanatory. I'm gonna have to move fast because Aquila has already told me she's gonna cut my microphone off. But really, carbon dioxide, I mean, you know, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it's the basic building block. I mean, we have to have carbon dioxide. I mean, plants use it. I mean, you know, without carbon dioxide, we'd be in the ice age right now. And just for those who like this kind of stuff, I know my science teacher would be proud of me right now. But carbon dioxide is, you know, it's just simply carbon, and it's 2 oxygens. You know, it forms a molecule, carbon atom and 2 oxygen atoms. But, you know, something I want to talk about real quick is it's only 70% carbon, and, you know, 30% carbon and 70% oxygen. So, you know, it's, you heard already, you know, it's odorless, you don't know it's coming. Carbon dioxide is part of our natural metabolism. You know, CO2 levels in the air right now is about 420 parts per million, and once you get into some of the cities, it may be higher than that. Just wanted to point out real quick, that's a very small amount. If you look at, you know, the atmosphere, you look at how much carbon dioxide makes up, you know, it's a very small portion. And argon is not even 1%, and carbon dioxide is 0.04%. You know, the carbon cycle is where the, you know, we have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and the trees take it and they eat it, and, you know, they give out oxygen. Without this, we wouldn't be alive right now. So, you know, you're going to hear me talk about nature-based projects and green-based projects, and you're going to hear the CCS people talk about synthetic forest. I'm not sure what that is. I'm trying to figure out what that is, but maybe they'll educate me to what a synthetic forest is. I know what trees are. Okay, we've heard of the good. You know, we hear the good, that we're all going to be rich, and, you know, we're going to be the Beverly Hillbillies, and we're going to be able to buy new tractors, and all these stories that we've heard about this, and it's real beneficial to our economy. Some of those things I'm not quite so sure about, but what I want to focus on right now is the bad and the ugly, because I don't think we've been told the entire story. Carbon dioxide is really bad for you. And we're taking something right now that's basically harmless to us, although you'll get a lot of argument from the climate change folks, which I'm not here to argue that tonight. That's another discussion. But right now it's harmless, but we're taking it and turning it into something that's very dangerous to us. You know, for over a century, carbon dioxide has been recognized as a hazard in the workplace. I think there's about, if I remember right, it's about 100 people every year die from carbon dioxide poisoning. Just a little bit of carbon dioxide can cause you health problems too. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. You know, one of the things that we talk about is how do we get here? You know, this is the international organization, the IPCC, and you know, they talk about all this climate change and temperature rise and that sort of stuff. But, you know, I put this up here for a reason. This is their top 3 priorities, the international group who handles this. And you can see there in the 3rd priority, it didn't take them long to get to the money part. You know, I'm not arguing that, you know, carbon dioxide is not going up in the atmosphere, but right now, we're not sure about how much we've contributed. How much has man contributed to that? It's definitely increasing according to the scientists. You know, the temperature's increasing also, but is it significant enough to endanger, you know, the drinking water supply for Southwest Louisiana? I don't think so. You know, they show this in a neat little diagram, this carbon capture stuff, and they have point source where they capture from the plants and everything. All their pictures are real beautiful. They got boats and water and all those things. Well, we have all that already, folks. I don't know what they're offering us because we have those things already. You know, and here's these big fans that they're going to remove carbon dioxide from the air. And one of my questions about this being a, you know, a mechanical person or a person that wrenches, I'm like, well, how far can you suck carbon dioxide away? And the answer was from there, well, indefinitely. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that. I don't think that's going to work. I think you'll be able to suck it from a short distance. But being in such a small percentage of the atmosphere, is I don't think you're going to be able to get it all. That's just my opinion. You know, it requires a tremendous amount of energy to this process. You can see some of the statistics that's been looked at. It's going to require anywhere from, you know, 46 to 191% of our energy requirements worldwide. So that alone, you know, our energy bills, they're estimated to go up 30 to 40% if we are somehow able to implement this to scale, which I don't think we can. You know, the Green New Deal is how this was funded, and this has been going on for years. And you know, being kind of an environmentalist myself, I actually think the environmentalists got hoodwinked on this. I think the companies were saying, hey, look here, we can make a bunch of money by agreeing to this. So in a way, I don't blame the companies, you know, saying, hey, we can capture CO2, we can inject it underground, but I don't think injecting it under our ground is a good idea. And, you know, what I have another big concern with is eminent domain for private gain. I think that's unconstitutional, and I think that needs to be abolished in the state of Louisiana. But you'll hear that this is kind of, you know, it's not very broad, and it's not going to happen in a lot of areas. You can see the map right there. This is planned for a lot of parishes in Louisiana. It's not just us, folks. This is going to be a statewide proposal before it's over with. Over 500 organizations have called for, you know, this is not a good idea, people. It's just not a good idea. And I'm not going to get into them, but you can see from all of their comments that it's not going to work and the cost is just too high to implement this. You know, here's what I like to look at. This is an independent organization, which I'm a member of, Taxpayers for Common Sense. You can see how they look at it. You know, it's had and this is true. I think we've spent about $20 billion already on this stuff. And I haven't seen the CO2 go down in the atmosphere, and I haven't seen the temperatures decrease except under a big old oak tree, a shade oak tree, then yeah, the temperatures decrease underneath that. We've already heard what happened in Mississippi, so continue to educate yourself about how dangerous this stuff is and what has happened already. To me, experience is what matters, not what somebody tells us. You know, their opinion, experience matters. Let's look at that more closely. Okay, we already saw about the spill. We saw about this gentleman where he was passed out in the car. His mother was waiting on him, you know. People almost died. I think if it would have been closer than 5,000 feet, we would have had some dead people, unfortunately. The government decided what caused the incident was too much rain and hilly terrain. Well, folks, I mean, that sounds like a lot of places in Louisiana to me, because you know we get some rain here, a lot of it. You know, talking about pipeline leaks, let's talk about pipeline safety. You know, we've only had a couple of spills. You'll hear about a couple of leaks, a couple of ruptures. Well, you know, that's not the big picture, because over the years, we've had several leaks, you know, across the state, in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. So pipelines, unfortunately, they do leak, they do rupture. Okay, this hit personally for me, the one down in Sulphur, because my daughter-in-law, she passes through there twice a day with my 3 grandchildren. And a little bit of background on this, the lady that lives there with her children, her cats was acting funny, and you know, she called her mom and said, "Mom, the cats are acting funny, and I think I hear a hissing noise." And her mom, you know, like us, a little bit older than that, said, "Get in the car, grab the kids." You know, she instantly thought about the pipeline, and they got out of there, fortunately. So thank goodness we didn't have a lot worse leak in this situation, because it could have, because what I understand, the response time was not acceptable. You know, you're going to hear a lot of argument about you can't have earthquakes in Louisiana. We just had one up in northwest Louisiana. And you can look at the USGS statistics. The USGS is actually predicting major earthquakes, you know, 25 to 50% chance, and it increases greatly as you move further to the north. And this is not my opinion, folks. We're going to be sitting on a ticking time bomb if that happens. This is the United States Geological Survey data. You know, you can look at the fault lines. The fault lines are actually increasing across the state. You're going to hear some people comment that say, well, you know, we're not like California. And I say, well, thank goodness. But, you know, our fault lines are increasing. You know, I'm not talking about the Angels winning the pennant, y'all. I'm talking about a disaster that could happen to us. I wish that's what we were debating here tonight, is who was going to win the World Series, but that's not the case. We saw about the lake, we saw the dead animals, killed the insects, killed the flies. This went for 15 miles, y'all, this damage, this fallout from this. And some people's going to say, well, how does that relate to what we're talking about? Well, the way it relates is they only had 1.6 million tons, and we're talking about 250 million metric tons in one site over here in one hole. That's how it relates, folks. The good old days. That's the only reason I put that in there. Life was simple. You know, one time we had a situation back on the farm over there in Pitkin, you know, with my grandpa. He was at the barn milking the cow. Somebody drove up in the driveway. I was around back feeding the chickens, getting ready for school, and they were blowing their horn. And that was like a 911 call back in those days, y'all. I mean, you know, we didn't have 911. So I went running around there. I was so excited. The guy was standing at the gate. He said, "Where's Uncle Rich at?" I said, "Well, he's at the cow milking the barn." Folks, I'm afraid that's where we're at right now, unfortunately. You know, this is not a Democratic issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is not a conservative, a liberal. This is all of us together, folks. That's the only way we're going to be able to fight this. These folks have ran across a cash cow, and like I say, we're subsidizing 100% up to trillions of dollars. And sometimes I'd really like to know what people are thinking. I really would, y'all. You know, to me, this is how I summarize the CCS proponents. I mean, this has been a lopsided discussion from the start to me, and we need to have both sides, and we need to hear both sides equally on carbon capture and injection. And you know, one thing I like to say, these people who are promoting this, inject it in your backyard, and then we'll talk. Well, let's talk about one of the big concerns, our aquifers. You know, let's zero in on our Chico aquifer here, folks. What happens when CO2 meets water, it forms carbonic acid. And then you get a lot of, you know, it starts to affect your pH, and you get leaching. And you can even leach out heavy metals over time. If that happens, folks, we're done. You know, and I've been to some of these meetings where the CCS folks, not picking on them by any stretch, but they hold up a can of Coke and they tell the audience, "Oh, it's just like drinking a can of Coke." And I'm sitting there chuckling, I'm going, well, I know what happens when you pour Coke on a battery, because I've done it before and y'all do too. It's very acidic, and it will cause some major problems. You know, a good pH is about 6.5 to 8.5 for drinking water. And I'm throwing this out to us as a people. We need to start looking at these kinds of things, and we need to say, look, this is our baseline, and we need to start measuring it and saying, you're not allowed to mess with that. we're not gonna allow you to tamper with that. With regards to pipelines, and I understand it now, they can build a pipeline or injection well 500 feet from the school, y'all. That's unacceptable. We've got some upcoming bills, some legislation that's gonna help us out, and hopefully we make some progress down in the next legislative session. To me, being a biologist and being a scientist and being a natural resource specialist, this hits close to home because I've always said this, growing up out in the woods, being raised by my grandparents, and going to McNeese and going to LSU and becoming somewhat educated, is this scientist, you know, he used to think that we could solve this with science. And he's changed his mind now, just like I have, and a lot of us. You know, it's gonna take, you know, to solve our environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And we don't know how to deal with that as scientists, y'all. We're gonna have to deal with that collectively as people. Scientists are not gonna be able to solve this alone. But thank y'all very much. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. Thank y'all.
Hey everybody, can you hear me? All right, I'm so thrilled to see how many people in the community are here tonight. My name is Burns. I'm a local physician. I work right down the road at Oakland Express Care. I hold multiple positions in the community, including with the coroner's office, vice president of the hospital. I work in the emergency room. I do hospitalist work. I do clinic work. I hold degrees in undergrad for chemistry and biology. My medical degree from Shreveport and LSU, and then the rest of my training in Alexandria at Rapides, and I hold a board certification for family medicine. I'm here tonight because I was asked by a patient actually that was concerned, and I keep getting these questions over and over and over from my neighbors, from my family, from other local members. Should I be concerned? Is this something that I should be concerned about? Now, I can't really speak to the environmental impact or even the economical impact, but I think that it would behoove all of us to consider environmental impact, economical benefits, and what type of health problems this could cause. So just to give you a little insight on CO2, that's something I deal with on a regular basis. People that have COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and emphysema. This is a ventilation disorder, and they cannot get the CO2 out. So the first thing that happens is they get CO2 narcolepsy, so they become confused, they get a headache, they become nauseous, and if that is prolonged, then that can lead to things like, such as coma, and then eventually death if nothing is done in a timely manner. So I also have, that's something that we see pretty regularly in the emergency room, in the hospital, in the clinics. So if there were to be CO2 that is compressed and for some reason was evacuated from the area that it was at, or a pipe was to burst, it could be detrimental to the surrounding area. This is 100%, there's no question about that. It could have dire impacts. As he said earlier in his presentation, 300 to 400 parts per million is what is normal inside of, or normal atmospheric pressure for CO2. At around 10,000 parts per million, you'll start seeing some slight increase in respiratory response. At about 15, 20,000 parts per million, then you'll start seeing the increased headache, nausea, maybe a little bit of confusion, and as that is increased, then the chance of death becomes more and more. If you were removed from the situation, what would be the long-term effects if you were next to this potential outburst of CO2? Well, if you were there long enough, and death obviously could result, but if you were able to survive and you were removed from the situation, you could have anoxic brain injury. That would be something that would be concerning. The long-term sequela would be different for every patient. So
And so I just wanted to talk a bit about the probability of an event occurrence. You know, we hired a company to come in and do a probability or risk analysis for us. But what we want to know is what's the probability of an event occurring. So I'm kind of a numbers guy, and I like numbers because numbers don't lie, numbers don't have feelings, numbers are just numbers. And so let's assign some numbers to some of the probabilities of an event. Let's look at the whole picture of CO2, and then let's decide whether it's a good decision for our parish. So if you look at, they estimate that the tax credit for the CO2 sequestration is going to be about $30.3 billion between 2022 and 2032. And you say, well, man, $30 billion is a lot, and we're going to use Exxon. I'm going to pick on Exxon tonight because they're involved in this. But last year, Exxon made $32.8 billion in profit. So why are we giving Exxon a part of $30 billion, right? We're using the general term of $85 per ton for credit is what they'll get credited for capture. And it can be as high as $180 a ton for direct capture, direct air capture. But in a refining process, for every 100 tons of process, you can count on about 10 tons of CO2. And I'm going to use tons as a general number. I'm not going to specify metric, imperial, or US because they're pretty close. So for every 100 tons of process, you're going to generate about 10 tons of CO2. And when you start looking at it, there's 17,000 plus cubic feet of CO2 per ton. And if we use the 30 billion factor just for that credit, we're talking about injecting about 6 billion cubic feet of CO2 subsurface, which that's a lot of CO2. And what bothers me about that is I think that within 10 years, CO2 sequestration will be obsolete. If you look at some of the new research, I think University of Connecticut's the last one I saw, they have a catless process that they can put in line with manufacturing and use a catalyst that's made out of, let me see, nickel and iron, which is a pretty inexpensive catalyst to capture your CO2. As we're doing it now, they're going to have to strip it with amines, and so I have a question about what percentage of the gas stream that's subsurface injected is actually going to be CO2. Are we going to have a 2%, 1%? Because I can guarantee you in business, if my permit says I can inject an additional 2% of a waste stream, that baby's going down the hole. And enough of you guys, I know some of you that have been in the business, you know that if you're cleaning a tank and you've got 10% BS in W bottom solids and water allotment for ship downline, it's going to be 10%. You're not going to ship good stuff if you can ship bad stuff. And again, this was a picture. This was a sulfur site that's had multiple failures. And so when we do a risk assessment, there's a number of things that you have to look at for a risk assessment. Number one, you've got to look at the owner. When I work for Exxon, or when I work for Occidental, if I apply for a contract, they're going to want to know all my safety numbers. What's my experience modifier rate? What's my probability of having an event? They're going to ask that of me, so we need to ask that. And you need to ask that. So what's the probability of the owner, its contractors, and its subgroups, like Denbury? And so, and when you look at a risk assessment, there's already industry numeric values. And we're going to go over a few of those. So you've got a number for the owner, and it's not just a geological assessment. I'm not going to get into the geological person because we've paid somebody to do that, so let's let them do their job. So a pipeline failure, the probability of a pipeline, 0.0001 is 0.1%. Okay? This is published, this is a industry standard. So for every 1,000 kilometers, that's a kilometer is what, about 6.63 miles, a little over half a mile. There's one failure every 2 years for 1,000 per 1,000 kilometer. So we can use 0.001 or we can use 0.0005. But we can assign a number to the probability of an event happening. So in a pipeline, and I know there's millions of miles of pipelines, but we know that there's a fire every 4 days, there's an explosion every 11 days, there's an injury every 5 days. And in 2023, there was a fatality every 26 days. The annual projected failure rate for a wellhead is 1%, 0.01. Okay? Fatigue is the primary culprit. These are industry standards. And so, and you guys that do the drilling, I see Bob's here, and there's a number of you that do this, but 1 to 4 in 10 of all drilling operations fail. Man, that's a tremendous rate. And if you don't want to use the 10% rate, use a 5% rate, use any rate that you want, but you have to assign a number to the probability of a failure on. And then we look at what I mentioned earlier, we have to look at what other contaminants in the well or in the waste stream that can cause corrosion. I'm going to pick on Exxon because they're involved, and they're really easy to pick on because they're a $300 million corporation. But on December 11th, 2024, the Fifth Circuit upheld a civil penalty against Exxon for $14,250,000. Now, you think, well, they're a $32 billion profit, $300 billion company. That's not a lot of money, but if you talk to Craig, he'll tell you a lot of the civil penalties have established rates that they can charge. You can't charge anymore. You have a limit between. With that, that one penalty was for 16,000 environmental violations. If I wanted to go to work for Exxon and they saw that I had 16,000 violations, Exxon wouldn't hire me. You would work in the industry. I see some of you here, you know what the answer would be. And it's easy to go on Exxon and look at some of their major failures. And if you go back not too far, and I remember this one well, was the Valdez in '89. They tried to get us to send all of our equipment there. It was in Puget Sound. But there were 3 reasons for the accident. It was human error because they had an intoxicated captain, and it's what I call the old Bill factor. And everybody knows that works in industry, there's old Bill back there, right? He's going to back over something, run over something, break something, going to drink something. But there's that human factor, and it was the intoxicated captain. They had an overworked crew. We have a short workforce these days. That's not uncommon. And then we had, to a lesser penalty, lesser degree, they had inadequate traffic regulation by the U.S. Coast Guard. That particular event, they had $900 billion in state, federal, and civil penalties. They had $500 billion in civil penalties, and those numbers don't include the cleanup, and nobody went to jail. Okay? So if we look at the probability of an event, and we said it's 1/10% for pipeline, or maybe it's half that. It's 1% for wellhead. It's 10%, up to 10% for drilling, and there's got to be a number assigned for human error, right? For the owner there. So what's the number for the probability of an event? And so down in Satorsha, they said the incident involved an extremely rare combination of events. That was Jesse Harris with Summit Carbon Solution. That's the owner. Now I'm going to give you these numbers. I'm saying there's maybe an 11% probability of some failure in the process during the year, whether it's the pipeline, it's the wellhead, it's the formation itself. And that number, 0.0 to the 8 zeros, 342, some of y'all have seen me put that number up. Y'all know what that is? I bet you some of you out there has got Powerball tickets in your car right now, right? That number on the right is the probability of winning the Powerball. But you know something about the Powerball? Somebody always wins, right? And it's just a matter of time. It's not that it's going to happen tomorrow. It may not happen in my lifetime, but we're going to have major events. And again, we're most concerned concerned about an event in the formation, right? I've got a Coke around here. Doc, you want that Coke I struck, you want to open it? That's what CO2, that's Henry's law in physics. That's CO2 when it particulates through the formation, that's what's going to happen. So, anyway, that's it for me, and that's the Satoshi there. Thank you for your time.
I wish I had a little cheat sheet up here, but I don't. I'm just gonna talk. I'm Renee Savant, and I am usually not front and center. I'm always behind the scenes. I usually am the one that you read if you follow the Louisiana CO2 Alliance Facebook page or website. I do the writing and the post and try to keep you informed with what's going on with our alliance. I'm not here this evening as an expert, an official, a politician. I'm standing here this evening as a citizen, a concerned citizen just like you. Like most of you, I had no idea that this CO2 initiative was going on until I got a phone call from a gentleman by the name of Roland Hollins one day. And I have a little homestead. I used to spend a lot of time in Baton Rouge. I served under 3 governors. And I walked away a long time ago because I got tired of seeing what I saw. And when I would get back from Baton Rouge, I felt dirty. I would take baths all weekend long after a board meeting. And so I spent most of my time at my homestead raising my chickens and let everything just go. But when I found out about this little thing called carbon capture and what was happening or is gonna happen to our water, our land, our future generations, I had to take a stand. If you would have told me I would be fighting an environmental issue, I would have told you that you were crazy. I always fought for economic development. I fought for the little small business guy when I was doing my battles in Baton Rouge. I have to be honest, I don't even recycle. We don't have recycling, and I don't go out of my way to recycle. So I can't call myself an environmentalist. But what I am is I'm a citizen that is very concerned about the future of Louisiana and very concerned with what my grandchildren will be left with if we don't stand up. So I want to take you back to the 70s. It's a long time ago. I'm going to age myself. I started out as an activist. The year was 1975. I was 15 years old, and I was a go-getter and a fighter. And I got the entire high school to do a walkout. All 400 kids to do a walkout because they removed the doors to the girls' bathroom because a couple of girls were smoking, and they removed the doors. And so I felt like it wasn't fair for all of us to pay the price for a couple of girls. So I got all the kids to walk out of the school, and it was about the fight. Now let's move forward to today. I'm a little wiser, and I call myself a strategist. And there's a way that you go and you fight your battles. And without a strategy, you have a hard time moving forward. And that's my role, is to help guide everyone that is going to be part of the alliance through a strategy that our voices can be heard instead of just being loud, because we need to have a strategy Because without a strategy, what happens, and the elected officials that are here tonight will tell you that they get hollered at all the time. You know, and they hear a lot of people hollering, so hollering is not gonna get us where we need to go. We need to have a strategy. On March 18th, it will be available, an ebook. It will be that you will be able to go to our website, and it is gonna be a step-by-step on how you, as an individual, if you've never made a stand, never sent an email, never made a phone call, how you can help in this movement and contact your elected officials. And doing the form emails, just a mass form email that everybody just sends the same email, that doesn't work. You need to tell your story. If you're a farmer and you're third generation, fourth generation farmer, what's this gonna do to you? What's this gonna do to your family? You know, so you need to tell your story, and when you call, you need to know what to say, but more importantly, you need to know what not to say. And so this is just gonna be a step-by-step guide to guide you through that. You know, there was a very important battle that we fought here in Louisiana in 1815, the Battle of New Orleans. They were outnumbered. They had horrible weapons, but they won. They had determination, they had strategy, and they had unity. And if we are gonna win this battle, that's what we need, because in this legislative session of 2025, this battle that we're fighting right now is gonna be won or lost. And it's every one of us that need to come together, not just the Louisiana CO2 Alliance or we the people. It's gonna take all of us. So I encourage you, if you're on Facebook, go to the Louisiana CO2 Alliance, follow us, you'll get a lot of good information. And then please join as a member, because our strength will come in the numbers of our members. And you can join on the website, or you can sign up in the back as you leave. If you didn't sign when you walked up, sign, because it's gonna take every one of us. I thank you, God bless.
I'll assure you one thing, that, I don't know, I wasn't there in that school hall, but I tell you what, I think Miss Renee's the one that took that door off. I tell you what, I wouldn't run for dog catcher if Miss Renee and Miss Victoria was against me, but I would run for president if they was for me, because they are just the real deal. You know, here's the thing, there's so much information that's been given, and it even be more. It's so important to inform people. You know, it's government's job to inform the public. You know, but sometimes government may not inform the public like they should. So it's important that the public then inform the government of the decisions that they make that they might be concerned with. That's what we've been doing. And let me tell you what's very important. It's not about the bad bills, you know, that we feel like that's been passed. What's most important is that we have the most important folks with us here tonight. It's the ones that make the decision for our communities, for now and for the future. Look, this CCS is a very serious thing. Look, at the end of the day, communities should be able to decide if the benefit is worth the risk. It's just the right way to do it. You know, look, here's what we do know. Look, I'm an oil field guy. I've talked to a whole bunch, Mr. Bob, engineers, a bunch of folks. I knew that it was more than minimum risk whenever I first heard about it. But you you wanna do a lot of research, you wanna contact a lot of your people that you worked with in the past, because you don't wanna cripple a parish. You know, our parishes is poor, and we need finances, to advance our schools and advance everything. But I'm gonna tell you what, when you really go to looking at this deal here, the risk, to your water, the things that you have risk to through your communities, all the CO2 that will be pumped, just the one well, and we have 2 more potential wells, 150 million metric tons for one well. Every bit of that has to pass through our neighborhoods, through our communities. Look, CO2 is, as you've seen tonight, can be a very bad situation. But to me, them pipelines with that dangerous CO2, what worries me the most is every bit of it is headed to being injected below your water aquifers. This is new technology. They like to say that it's enhanced oil recovery, that we've been doing this 45, 50 years. Well, you've had a Class 2 permit for that long. Why did you need a Class 6 for this? Look, let me say this. What's so important to people when times like this come, it matters to the people that you have elected and put in office. Look, we have our senator, we have our representatives. We have them, all the way, Mr. McCormick, all the way from Co2 Parish. And Mr. Chairman, these are the folks that's gonna make the difference in this next session. Look, they say in the Senate, I believe in the House, we got bills, Mr. Carrier, our Representative Carrier and Representative Owens, and I think several of them are bringing bills to allow the people to vote, the people decide if the risk is worth the reward. That's outstanding. We need that. We need it to get into the Senate. We need the Senate to move it on to the governor. And because it's important that citizens have the last say with these things, not corporations, not anybody else. Look, we need to protect our communities and our generations, not on what experts say out of LSU or what experts say that have the most to gain from these companies. You're hearing a lot of good information here tonight. But look, so we have bills that's gonna try to help you give our people a chance to vote. But if these things come, we got other very, very important bills that we're working with our legislatures. I thank God that we have, look, today, right here tonight, look at all the legislators that we have here sitting on our behalf and standing on our behalf. I appreciate every one of them. Look, we've been strong supporters of our governor and of our legislatures. That has not changed. But this session is the most important session, I believe, in our history, because this is a very serious, serious thing. Keep them in your prayers as they move forward. Keep our parishes in our prayers. And God bless each and every one of you. And you know what? We had 6 teams out of 6 schools, I believe, that was in the girls' playoffs tonight. There's no telling what we would have had here if them girls wouldn't have kept their grandpas and grandmas at the ball game eating popcorn. God bless every one of you.
Good evening, I am Brad LeBlanc. I am the senior geoscientist for the Sweet Lake Land and Oil Company, also known as North American Land. I got involved with this really because, initially we had a well that was drilled was still making about 45 barrels of oil per day. It's probably made about $12 million worth to the 8/8, but I mean, no telling what it could make over time. It may do that for another 10 or 20 years, you just don't know. Or you may be able to drill a well at right angles to it, and you may intersect way more fractures that may produce even better for longer. Tonight, I want to talk about the main points I want to cover is just the stranded oil. That particular company, or Exxon now, can just go ahead and take over the land and expropriate it. And I said, well, how are you going to value the amount of oil that we're not going to get? You know, because you convert this well to a CO2 injection well. The whole idea of expropriation, I think, it crawls up everyone's skin because you pay taxes on this property. All of a sudden, somebody has the conferred authority by the Department of Natural Resources, and nothing else has to happen. They get a certificate, and the Department of Natural Resources says, we don't have to be involved. We can be involved, but we don't have to be involved. And so, of course, our president, Claude Leach, many of you may know the Leach family. Claude's a really good guy. He in no way wanted to participate in the CO2 injection because we were told by our attorney out of New Orleans that if you do allow this, if you have a number of your neighbors, landowners around you that want to participate in this, you may just be out of luck, because I think it's a 75-25 percentage, as we learned in that last committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. And so you're just going to have to play this out in court, and Lord knows we don't want another court case. But that was what we were faced with as a company. So Claude, you know, was glad that I stepped up, called our representatives, you know, Charles Owen, Brett Guyman, you know, Danny McCormick. Thank y'all all for paying attention. But it was an issue for us because we were going to lose some oil and gas minerals. I'm going to show you how. We're going to also address the safety issues. Many of you have already talked about that, so I really don't have to spend much time with those slides tonight. The economic feasibility of it was a big issue to me also because when we were first approached, we were told we're going to make millions. And we were approached over about a 2-year period that you just sign right here, you're going to make millions. And I'm like, well, what's the formula for making millions? I don't know if any of you have had that same, you know, statement made to you. We certainly had to us, but nobody could really satisfactorily give me the formula for how we were going to make millions. If we bring a barrel of oil to the surface of the ground and you're fortunate enough to be in a unit that's created by an oil and gas company, well then, for whatever you lease for, times the proportionate share of the unit that you have, that's what you're going to get, times the price of the oil or the gas, or both. But there was no real formula for giving CO2, you know, whether it's metric tons, however you want to measure it, to convert tax credits to actual cash. We had to research that. The next thing we'll talk about is really the authority granted to the Conservation Commissioner. When you start reading, and maybe many of the representatives here have already read through it, when you start reading through the laws that have been changed and granted to the Commissioner, it's really quite shocking, because he's going to be the one that tells you how much you're going to get, how much they're going to value your land at if they convert, if you're going to a reservoir to now a CO2 plume, and you won't really know what the Commissioner's doing. How is he coming to that number? We do that in the oil and gas industry. As a geologist and geophysicist, we will make structure, net pay, isopac, volumetrics, give it to a reservoir engineer, and we have several reservoir engineers, and usually between the 2 or 3 that we use, we come up with a value. We generally can sell that to the market. If you're really in a hurry, you can have a fire sale, or you can have a fair market sale. So there's the science of what we do, the science side, but there's also the business side, because you definitely have to keep the ball rolling by finding investment dollars for every project that you come up with. And if the commissioner gets involved in a situation like this, and this is in the infancy now, from what I'm learning, that take it to the ultimate conclusion, it's like they're taking the oil and gas industry apart, brick by brick. When we first started in this business, you used to be able to drive down I-10 between Lafayette and Lake Charles, and you'd see a drilling rig north and south of I-10. You don't see that anymore. So what used to be the lifeblood of the Gulf South of America, it's no longer. The revenue is now being generated through businesses like Air Products that want to inject CO2 into the ground. Air Products, according to Kim Coates of the Lake Maurepas area, they're already out of business, and that's often what happens with companies that receive tax credits in order to sustain their business operation. They may give great salaries to their executives for a short time, but I can promise you, whatever country it's in, from Spain to the United States, if they're surviving on a tax credit, they eventually go out of business, and you end up with a graveyard of windmills, a solar farm, or what we're going to have here. It's really too soon to tell, but I think many of us are here because we have a genuine concern, and we're all, I think, reading the same tea leaves. So I have all of this information, too much to read, I think. My main concern was, once the commissioner realizes the danger of drilling into a CO2 plume, how willing is he even going to be to allow a well drilled through the CO2 plume to get to the oil and gas that you believe is below your property? Where are the promised millions of dollars to participating landowners? Because what happens when the cost of operations exceeds those tax credits, and it will. Just like Air Products went out of business, the cost of operations will likely exceed the tax credits. You can sell captured CO2 into a very limited market, but I don't see millions of dollars there. So what's left, I think, is they can sell those tax credits. That is a game for the larger corporations to play. Exxon can play it. Our partner, we have a partner in Hillcorp for our West Chalkley field. I've spoken with their attorney. They said, look, we don't understand how they're making money off of it. We looked at it from all sides, and we just can't see how they're going to make money on it. So if you have signed a participation agreement for carbon sequestration, you may be wondering, should I have signed that agreement? And I think that it's going to be a good solution to have all of us, with our legislative help, to try to turn back the clock, and that's what we pray for. Yes, we've all seen how dangerous pipelines can be. Lawsuits. There was a gentleman speaking in Baton Rouge at length. If the surface owner and the mineral owner are not the same, then you have a lawsuit that's likely going to happen. The greatest way to strand minerals is to have a lawsuit over your property, because investors, which we have to look for our projects that we get drilled, if there's a lawsuit anywhere around, they just don't want any part of that. They need to go find a clean lease, something that's not going to just land them in court over a period of time. They just won't do it. CO2, I'll just speak real quickly. I won't talk too long on this, but it does play a vital role just in our atmosphere. People have seen that. I mean, back in the days of the Carboniferous, it was 10 times as high, and that would be about 4,000 parts per million, but there was a thriving, prolifically green earth at the time. My chief concern, state and federal governments, and we know this, are just moving way too fast for, to properly study all aspects of safety, legitimacy, economic feasibility of storing CO2. And I'll tell you, many scientists just doubt that storing CO2 really is going to accomplish any significant cooling effect on the planet. I put this book up here titled Unsettled. I advertised this to the legislative committee. by Stephen E. Coonan, publication 2019. It's not too difficult to read. I would encourage each of you to get that book. And there's my business card on the bottom right. Look, I have been doing this for 45 years now. Half of my time has been spent in the offshore, half in the onshore, offshore and onshore, almost equally split. So I work with geology and geophysics. I think Mike and Charles have talked a little bit about wishing they had some examples of seismic. I have an example of seismic data here that you'll see. I'll skip over this slide. This is just our tract of land on the right at the dash. If you can see it, the big black line is the unit that we're in. It's a horizontal well in the Austin Chalk. And then Denbury comes along and they want to inject, and this is from the agreement that we got, they want to inject from the base of the Frio to the base of the Midway. In the middle is the Wilcox, which of course is a sought after oil and gas zone. We look for oil and gas in the Wilcox, north, south, east, and west, and where this particular tract of land is. Why would you want to stick CO2 in sands that could be potentially hydrocarbon bearing? I just don't understand that at all. Listen, CO2 is purchased by nurseries and they put it in their greenhouses. So CO2 in the natural is not really a threat. You know, it's not an asphyxiant. It doesn't act that way until we concentrate it and put it into CO2 plumes. But if you buy a plant that's beautiful green, you bring it home, maybe it doesn't look as good, it's because it's not in that same environment anymore. So CO2, as God put it in the atmosphere, is a good thing. We need it. Back in the days of the Carboniferous period, over on the left, you see the purple line is CO2 is about 10 times higher, and we're down way on the right where it is now, about 420 parts per million. The light blue line is the temperature, so you can see in the middle of the Mesozoic where I put that red oval, temperature and CO2 really don't track. So often I have seen different presentations over the years, and I have looked at this particular issue for a long time, and to me, I feel like CO2 is more a result of, it's not a cause of natural global warming. So just keep that in mind. It's a result of, not a cause of, natural global warming. If you disagree with that statement, I'm going to ask you to prove it. This is just an artist rendition of what it looked like back in the Carboniferous period, where little, cattails grew to be 60 feet tall with a 10-foot cattail on the end of it. These are the various sources of CO2. If you just notice the ocean on the right is twice as much water as there is land. When the oceans cool, they absorb CO2. When they warm, they release it. And there's all these other contributors of CO2. So if you put a direct air capture device or unit in the middle of that, I question the effectiveness of it, and so I think the legislator, if you're going to go forward with this, require that you have some accountability to it. The oceans, as I'm saying here, is a Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. It acts like a radiator for the Earth. Warm ocean waters rise and cool ocean waters dive down deep. The graph at the bottom, if you can see that, is from 1860 to 2020, and you can see it's on a regular pattern. Nothing dangerous to see here. Atmospheric composition, others have talked about it. You've got nitrogen 78%, oxygen 21%, argon 0.93, carbon dioxide is 0.04 roughly today. If you had a 10,000 seat auditorium, that would take up about 4 seats. Okay, so that's what we're arguing about. Dr. John Christie, University of Alabama in Huntsville, says it's like a tug of war going on between the things that impact the surface of the Earth. And most of that is a downward atmospheric radiation, solar radiation, and carbon dioxide is that little tiny man on the far right of the tug of war, right there. think that Mike or somebody had a very similar graph up, but look at the metric tons of CO2 sequestered at the same time period that CO2 rose. So it can be argued that the Earth is simply replenishing its CO2 from its many sources. That's my challenge. If you have a direct air capture system, turn it off for a couple of weeks and then step away about 300 feet from that unit and you monitor how much the CO2 has dropped in the surrounding area. My thought is not going to drop hardly at all because the Earth simply has a million sources of replenishing itself, which is natural to our environment. So this was a chart from 2016. NASA published this, and they said that a quarter to half of Earth's vegetated lands has showed significant greening over the last 35 years, largely due to rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. And on the right, you see that this was an international team of 32 authors from 24 institutions using all sorts of high-tech equipment to come up with that result. You'll see Africa down there is white, because that's the Sahara Desert. Let's look at that. 6,500 to 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was actually experiencing monsoon rains. And lush vegetation was formed, and we know this from fossil evidence left behind in the current Sahara, and this actually lasted for several thousand years. So whether it's exploding volcanoes, and that was Mount St. Helens in 1980, or deep hydrothermal vents, those vents occur all along the mid-Atlantic ridge between the North American continent and the European continent, the South American continent, and Africa. So those vents are just all along the mid-Atlantic ridge, and they do this 24/7, and we're all okay. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time here because everybody else pretty much already covered the problem with CO2 pipelines. But this particular graph was submitted by one of the pipelines up in Illinois, and in just a 5-minute period, you can see you may not be able to see, but the deep blue circle in the middle is the 50,000 parts per million cloud that can be developed. And I thought that whoever had, I don't know if that was Mike, you saw the heavy cloud of CO2, and it just dropped. It's very heavy, and then it just spreads laterally. Those are the effects of it that I think Dr. Burns, thank you, read. And this same picture was used already by Exxon. It took 2 hours, by the way, for Exxon engineers to take control of this, not 5 minutes. Okay, so in 5 minutes, if you can get to 50,000, and this particular day it was windy, but suppose it's not windy, and suppose that 2 hours it really spread just laterally. You can imagine. And then this is the same facility. I put this here because I find that if they have the ability to just take your land, and I've got, I think my veterinarian is one of my best friends. He's got a nice track, a little ranch. He's got some horses. He's worked very hard to develop that. Well, so today they can just build a pipeline across it or put one of these compressor stations right there, if they wanted to, without getting his permission. And that's what the law reads. And it's really appalling. And I just think that everybody here that kind of feels that pain, because you wouldn't want that in your backyard, would you? And this was also shown, the Exxon pipeline. Much of what was in Mississippi was purchased. Denbury had already completed that. These I won't go through too much because you've already seen those catastrophes. I think that the bottom illustration is just a lake. They thought that maybe it was a landslide that entered the lake in South Africa and maybe disrupted the waters, but there actually was a video of it. And what I tend to think now is that maybe just the source of the CO2 got to a point to where it overcame the weight of the water that was holding it down finally. And that's a great example of what happens on the left. See, all drilling into CO2 reservoirs. Well, let me tell you, when we build a well plan, you know, there's so much regional and local information to build a well plan. You can study the mud weight they used, any kind of a, you know, gas kicks they took, you know where to set your pipe because you can see the pressures are climbing at certain cases. So you generally do a pretty good job of building that. But now that's a seismic line on the right. Suppose they had injected in a well in the shallow or upper third of that seismic line had been injecting CO2. That blue line is a fault. That's an actual fault that comes to the surface. And you see what I put there as a crawfish pond. That could very easily happen. And if we were drilling through that and some of the CO2 leaked across that fault and finally jumped into where we were at the well, what would happen is that these kicks that you take are more akin to what you saw in the explosion, I think, because CO2 expands extremely rapidly once it gets to the surface. And I think that's the big danger. That's what really concerns me, and I think concerns a lot of people. So imagine we're 5 or 10 years from now, and this is going on unchecked, without your support, without your telling your legislator, look, we're really concerned about this. Suppose they have so many unchecked, unmapped, uncharted CO2 plumes, and you do get some drilling permits to drill, and you experience what they experienced in terms of a blowout. That, to me, is a likely occurrence. So, I put it here because it is heavier than air. It's heavier than natural gas. Natural gas, methane, when we hit that, it rises. Not CO2, it just settles. And it starts spreading laterally. So this is the study that was done by Noble as well. And much of these reports, I mean, they're saying that it gets to 5% saturation. Well, 5% is 50,000 parts per million. So 50,000 parts per million is way bigger than 4,000 parts per million, what we had back in the Carboniferous period. You see, that was natural. That was a natural occurrence, but it caused prolific growth. 50,000 parts per million is really causing a catastrophe. So, creating a CO2 plume isn't like drilling into anticipated gas or oil reserves. Why? Because well planners have a long and broad regional and local well history that generally surrounds exploratory wells and development wells. Creating a CO2 plume can require special casing that's resistant to CO2 or carbonic acid. I've read recently where some of the, am I going too long? I am. All right, I'm going to move on. This 186,000 straws of abandoned wells in Louisiana. This is just going over the economics, other concerns from the commissioner, which I've already outlined for you, and then conclusion. Look, CO2 is vital to our existence. We need it. But the real problem is creating a plume that's unmapped. You know, where are the promised millions of dollars to landowners? What's the formula to convert tax credits into distributable cash? I don't think it exists. How likely is it that the commissioner will prohibit drilling through a CO2 plume in the future? I think it's pretty likely if we don't do anything about it. We just sit back and do nothing. Lawsuits, yes, they are a problem, but leaky faults are a real problem because I think if they just do that, especially in an area where it's not a four-way closure just means it's dipping in all directions from the very apex of the structure. So if you inject CO2 on a monoclinal dip, it's just dipping like this. The CO2 is going to go wherever it wants to go. And it'll find a fault and it'll leak up to the surface, or it'll find one of these orphan wells, and it'll just, you know, go back to the atmosphere. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
doing tonight? Appreciate y'all inviting me down here tonight. When they first invited me down here, they wanted me to tell you about a bill that I was offering. But first of all, I'd like to kind of give you a backstory how I got here. First thing I want to say is this. You got some of the finest state reps and senators sitting right here in front of you. I've been serving down there for going on 5 years. They're top shelf. They're very liberty-minded. They're very fair. And they'll listen to your voice, and you should be proud of them. I've worked in the oil field my whole life. But in about 2015, I got mad the way this state was being run. So I decided to get involved. Told everybody if they would just let me worship my God, love my family, and run my business, they wouldn't have to put up with me, but now they do. And so the first thing I started doing was grassroots organizing, just like y'all are doing here tonight. And this is where it starts. And I'd like to tell you this. You don't live in a democracy. You hear that all the time. You live in a constitutional republic. And in a constitutional republic, the rights and the responsibilities belong to the people. And nobody can take that away. But there are always going to be tyrants in this world, and they're always going to be coming after your rights. So you've got to get motivated, you've got to get active, you've got to do what you're doing here tonight. When I first started grassroots organizing, we had something come to our area called the Kettle Lake National Heritage Area. We did some research, we studied it, and we figured out over a period of time it was going to be harmful to our private property rights. This come out of Washington. You know, when we started discussing this, you know the first thing they told us? It's a done deal, it's over with. Have they told y'all that? They're lying, they're scared of you. That's the first thing they tell you. So we organized, and we were fortunate. Our elected officials in Washington listened to us, and within 30 days, the group just like this, we had killed that federal legislation. That's what it takes. It takes people organizing like y'all. After that was over with, somebody called me up and said, hey, our state representative is term limited. You want to run for office? No, I don't. Leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it. And things continued on and on and on. God dealt with my heart. And I decided to step up and run. Stepped up and I ran, and didn't know what God's plan was for me. But then COVID came along. I said, I've always had the fire of liberty burning in my belly, and I wasn't going to take what they were dishing out. Now let me tell you what a liberty-minded person thinks about what happened during COVID. This is what a liberty-minded person thinks, and that's what we try to be. If you want to get a shot, get a shot. If you don't want to get a shot, don't get a shot. If you want to wear a mask, wear one. If you don't wear a mask, don't wear one. If you want to go to church, go to church. If you don't want to go to church, don't go to church. You are more responsible for your life and your loved ones. I guarantee you, you care more about your community and their people than anybody that's in politics. You deserve that. You know, to me, there's two things about this, and I will say this. I've been in oil and gas business my whole life. The shallow oil and gas business. I'm talking about, it was a tough life, right? I loved every minute of it, but it was tough. 6-7 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day, we worked. Then we come home all night, and I wrote. I've been to Oberlin when I was in high school rodeos. All around this area I've been here. But we were just proud people, hard-working people. When they tell you the oil and gas business supports this, they're lying to you. There are a few. The billionaire companies that want to be multi-billionaire companies, they do support it. But the oil and gas people don't support that. That's the first lie. The second thing I'd like to cover with you is Tom DeWeese. It's private property rights. I've got my phone over here doing Facebook Live. I read the quote. It's communism can be summed up in the abolition of private property rights. When they're taking the private property rights away from your individuals, they're heading you towards communism. The first time we organized as a grassroots group, we had a gentleman named Tom DeWeese. We flew him in to come speak to us. They kept telling us, you gotta compromise, you gotta compromise. Oh, I hear that all the time. You gotta compromise, you gotta compromise. This is what he said. They're your private property rights. Why do you want to compromise? They all belong to you. Why do you want to give any of them away? That stuck a note with me. Private property rights. Nobody has the right to put anything on your property that you don't want there. And the second thing is the dangers of this. And we've been through numerous meetings in Baton Rouge. And I don't know if there's something else I'll share with you. I don't know if any of y'all get my email updates. I have, during COVID, I started a grassroots organization, Operation Golden Arrow. We have about 60,000 members that signed up to get our email updates. Every week we send out emails. And we have been sending it out about carbon capture. Because the people are, to be honest with you, until it comes to your town, you're just not paying attention. And then you're already behind the 8 ball. So it's important. I know they talk about signing up for emails or giving your information. When you leave here today without any of your information, they can't contact you. They've got to have some way to get in contact. So I encourage you to do that. Let's talk about the biggest threat I see from CO2 leaks is asphyxiation. To make a long story short, short, when natural gas leaks, these are rough numbers. When natural gas leaks, it weighs half as much as the air, so it has a tendency to disperse. It has a artificial smell added to it. It smells like rotten eggs. So you all know that smell, don't you? You know that smell, and you know it's a dangerous smell. It raises your attention. CO2 is odorless. It weighs 1.5 times as much as air. So it wants to stay down close to the ground. And for the last time in committee, I asked, is any additives going to be put in this so we can smell it like we do natural gas? The answer was no. They're concerned about chemical reactions with the CO2. So that's your two biggest threats, in my opinion. The other thing is how corrosive this stuff is. The pipe they put in these wells, the estimated cost is somewhere around $1,700 to $1,800 a foot. It's what this pipe costs. That's how corrosive this is when it turns into carbonic acid, like they were speaking of a while ago. But the pipelines aren't going in. My understanding, as of now, they can use existing pipelines. They don't have to use pipelines made out of this new more expensive pipe. So that's a serious concern. But the bottom line is this. It's your private property rights. You should be willing to fight for them. And I can guarantee you, even though I'm from North Co2 Parish, I live about 2 miles from Texas, 6 miles from Arkansas. Drove all the way down here 3 hours tonight to talk to you, and I'm trying to drive back 3 hours back home when we get done. I just want you to know, as long as you're in this fight, I'll be in this fight with you. I'll stand beside you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Charles Owen. I'm a state legislator. I represent Vernon and parts of Vernon and Morgar. He didn't tell y'all who he was. That's Danny McCormick. He represents District 1. He has the farthest drive, I think, of any legislator that comes down. And he's literally at the far northeast side of the state. I wanted to tell y'all real quick about a bill that I am bringing this time. I'm with Danny and Senator Heather Cloud and Representative Shamhorn and Representative Carrier. We all came in the same time together. We all got elected in 19, so I'm in my 5th year down there. I am bringing a bill this time to try to provide a local opt-out option. Okay? What I want to do, and
first of all, I hate that we have to do it. And I asked the lawyers at the House, do we have to do this? They said yes. I said, why can't the police jury just say no right now? Because that's the way our law is. Look, our law is messed up. It's like a snake in a lawnmower. It is, we have so many weird laws in Louisiana that constrain who we are, they constrain our liberties. I don't know that they were all put in place to mess with us, but there's a lot of things that just mess with us. I wish right now that the police jury in Allen or Vernon or Beauregard could say, we're not issuing that permit. But because of the way our law is established, they can. They can come in and do this. So what my legislation is going to do, it's going to go up down two options. First one is it's going to give the parish governing authority the right to say yes or no to this. The people of Allen Parish, you elect your police jury, they should be able to say, yes, we want this business activity, or no, we don't. They can say you don't want liquor here, or you don't want gambling here. If they happen to vote a way that the citizens don't want, there is a fail-safe in there where if 15% of the registered voters will bring a petition, then you can vote on it. So if your police jury makes you mad, and look, it may be a case that a police jury says no, and the citizens say we want yes. I can't imagine anyone doing that. But it is meant, this is meant to be as close to a democracy in this moment as we can. Danny's right, we're a constitutional republic. Y'all elect people to make these laws, because trust me, you don't want this job. There's so many things that go on inside of government. And you elect people to go down there and to vote on your behalf and to make decisions on your behalf. And if you don't like what they do, then you run them off. I actually think it should be easier to have a recall. It's too hard to recall fools like us. It is. It's almost impossible. 2 years ago, we had a legislator down there who was bringing a bill, Paul Hollis, and he was going to bring a bill to make it easier to recall, to get the threshold very low. You know what happened? He got crossways with some people who were helping him. He got crossways with people who were saying, we think it needs to be 10% of the voters. And he was going, no, it needs to be 20. And they got into a fight and it fell apart. So I think I'm going to do that next year. But anyway, that's what the bill is. It is House Bill 4. I wrote it in November. I've been circulating it. I let the police juries in Vernon and Beauregard read it. No one told me not to. I didn't really hear back from Beauregard. But no one told me not to do it. So I think that's the best thing for us to do. Now, if I were king for a day, if I had 3 more wishes, I would make carbon sequestration an illegal activity. And here's the reason. Look, enhanced oil recovery has been going on a long time, apparently. I'm not an oil man. I just, as way of background, I was a military officer. After I graduated from Leesville High School, I went to Louisiana Tech, and then I went into the Air Force. I've never been in an oil field. It's not my thing. I had no reason to know about carbon sequestration or enhanced oil recovery until these last couple of years when this thing was dropped on us. But enhanced oil recovery is used to get oil out of the ground in these fields that aren't producing well. And so the people that are involved in this say, we've got a great process, that's what this is, and that's all we're going to do with these wells. My take on it is that is not the case. If you're doing enhanced oil recovery, you are pulling a product out of the ground that's going to be sold, it's going to go into the market, it's going to provide an economic benefit, it's going to do all sorts of good things. Carbon sequestration is creating a waste site. Yep. This is creating a dump, and it is a dangerous dump that we have smart people will tell you we don't know what it's going to do. So that's where I'm going with this. Now, I'll tell you, there's a lot of things that I'm doing, trying to, I would say, shape the battlefield before we get there in April. I sent a letter the other day to the Department of Natural Resources and to the Department of Environmental Quality. In my mind, because we are creating a waste site, that the Department of Environmental Quality needs to manage this. This is not a natural resource. We are taking something out of the air and we're creating a toxin and we're shoving it into pipes and then we're putting them in the ground. Where is the natural resource? I don't understand it. So Secretary Gray and Secretary Giacomello, I don't pronounce her name right, who runs DEQ, they both owe me an answer on that. Okay? I'm also trying to get the EPA involved to talk to me about the tools that are out there. Now, my background was in the military. I was at what they call a target planner. We decided, we made recommendations of things that were going to get blown up. We picked targets and bombs, and a subcomponent of that we do, because we're a good country, we model things before we go blow them up. We give probabilities of damage, and then if we're going to go blow up something like a chemical refinery or an oil refinery, we have modeling tools that'll show us where the plumes are going to go in the air. So the federal government has this technology. I'm going to try to force feed them to come to the table and to either tell us, they can tell us where the plumes are going to go or not. Because right now, everyone's being very ambiguous. It is not good enough for me for them to say, well, yes, there's a risk. No, that is not good enough for me. And I'll tell you the other thing, and I'll sit down because we've been here a long time. The thing that drives me on this is because of where I'm from. In Vernon Parish in the late 30s and early 40s, several thousand families got knocks on their door. The United States Army said, we need your land. We need your daddy's 40 acres. We need your 10 acres. We need you. People were having to leave Peaston Ridge and go to Evans, to go to Slagle, all over the parish. Fascism was on the march, and our citizens said, okay, we understand this. We don't like it. And some of those people are still alive. A lot of their children and grandchildren are still alive. And in fact, we gather once a year and talk about this. Because we gave for the country. This is not that moment. That's right. There is no fascism on the march here. This is a lie. This is a lie from the pit of hell about climate change. Climate change is an absolute lie. Man-made climate change is a lie. And they're trying to take our liberty, they're trying to take our property, they're putting our families and our lives at risk in perpetuity for this. So I am sorry that these laws are in place. They've been around since 2009. This didn't happen in 2020. Yes, there was a vote in 2020. I'm going to go ahead and confront this with people listening. There was a vote in 2020 at the end of the legislative session. Every one of us voted for it. We came in and all we were told was, hey, we're going to expand this thing called carbon capture, and it's going to help the oil and gas industry. Well, Daddy's in the oil and gas industry. I'm thinking, well, maybe I don't really have that in Vernon Parish. Maybe this will help someone in Houma or Lafayette or somewhere. Now, I'm very skeptical of all climate things, but it was like, there was no end state to this that was ever briefed to us. I had no idea it was poison. I wish I had that vote back. I probably 1,000 votes. I wish that one would come back, and the vote had been 95-1 as opposed to 96-0. But I'm going to fight this with both hands, with everything I have, because liberty is ours, and we are not going to give it up. Thank y'all for having this. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. These guys right here, we've been working together on this for, well, over a year. And each of us has taken certain bills and followed them. Some of them we kind of duplicating. I had talked to Charles about piggybacking on his bill, and he thought better that I should go ahead and run my own bill. So I don't understand how in the hell they can permit this stuff being bad like it is. And I talked to Secretary Gray. Nobody can give you an answer on that at all. So, and we keep asking questions, but I filed a bill last week, Thursday, I think, we gonna go give this to, we work for you guys. Y'all don't want it, we don't want it. I'm not a scientist, I'm not as smart as Chuck, but I'm gonna do whatever y'all want, period. And so I filed a bill Thursday. We're gonna be able to vote on it, and what else was I was talking about? Anyway, we're gonna be able to vote on that, and my bill's gonna pass. The second bill I filed last week was on increasing the liability for the companies. we all got together and we each handled different bills, and this is one of mine. And the best part of it on the back is like, okay, unless otherwise provided by law, the ownership of a tract of land carries with it the ownership of everything that is directly above it or under it. The owner may make works on, above, or below the land as he pleases and draw all the advantages that accrue from them unless he is restrained by law or by rights of others. And that's the way it should be. You ought to be able to do whatever you do with your land on top and below. So I think we're going to do well. I don't understand.
Thanks. Stay right here, Joy. Stay right here. I'm Heather Cloud, the senator that represents this area. I represent Allen, Evangeline, Avoyles, some of St. Landry, and some of Rapides now. And I remember, DeWitt, I don't know, probably 4.5, 5 years ago, we sat down at the Crawfish Shack. First time I ever heard about carbon capture and sequestration. We sat down with the company and a few elected officials around the table, and they pitched the idea of carbon capture and what that would mean for Allen Parish. And as I listened to them tell me about the deal, I heard